NATO and Russia, a tumultuous relationship explored. There is no denying that NATO and Russia have a tumultuous relationship. It has been over 2 decades since the end of the Cold War, yet tensions between the two powers remain high, with periodic flare-ups of conflict. In this article, we will explore the reasons for the tense relationship between NATO and Russia, and look at some of the key events that have shaped this relationship. One of the main reasons for the fraught relationship between NATO and Russia is a fundamental difference in their worldviews. NATO is essentially a Western alliance, with a focus on liberal democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. Russia, on the other hand, has a more authoritarian political system, with a strong central government and a tendency towards geopolitical assertiveness. This difference in values has led to a clash of interests, particularly in Eastern Europe and the former Soviet Union. Another source of tension between NATO and Russia is the issue of expansion. Since the end of the Cold War, NATO has expanded eastwards, incorporating former Soviet bloc countries such as Poland, the Czech Republic, and Hungary. This has been seen by Russia as a threat to its security, as it fears that NATO could eventually encircle Russia itself. Russia has responded to this by pushing back against NATO expansion, both diplomatically and militarily. One example of Russia's pushback was the 2008 conflict with Georgia. Georgia, which had been seeking closer ties with the West, had applied for membership of NATO in 2008. Russia saw this as a direct challenge to its sphere of influence, and responded by invading Georgia and annexing 2 of its provinces, South Ossetia and Abkhazia. This conflict demonstrated Russia's willingness to use military force to push back against perceived threats to its security. Another example of tension between NATO and Russia was the crisis in Ukraine in 2014. The Euromaidan protests in Ukraine led to the ousting of the pro-Russian president Viktor Yanukovych, and the installation of a pro-Western government. Russia responded by annexing Crimea, a move that was widely condemned by the international community. Pro-Russian separatists also took control of parts of eastern Ukraine, leading to a protracted conflict that is still ongoing today. NATO has condemned Russia's actions in Ukraine, and has supported the Ukrainian government with military aid and training. In response to NATO's expansion and perceived threat to its security, Russia has stepped up its military presence in Eastern Europe and the Baltic states. NATO has responded by increasing its own military presence in the region, with troops and equipment stationed in countries such as Poland and Romania. This has led to an escalation of tensions, with both sides engaging in military exercises and war games that simulate conflict scenarios. Despite the tense relationship between NATO and Russia, there have been some attempts at reconciliation. The NATO-Russia Council was set up in 2002 as a forum for dialogue and cooperation between the two sides. However, the Council has become largely ineffective in recent years, with meetings cancelled and no substantive progress made. In addition, there have been some attempts at arms control, such as the New START treaty between the US and Russia, which limits the number of nuclear weapons that the two sides can possess. Looking to the future, it is unclear what direction the relationship between NATO and Russia will take. On the one hand, there are factors that could increase tensions, such as Russia's assertive foreign policy and NATO's continued expansion. On the other hand, there is a recognition on both sides that cooperation is necessary in areas such as counterterrorism and arms control. Ultimately, the path that the relationship takes will depend on the actions of both NATO and Russia, and on the wider geopolitical context. In conclusion, the relationship between NATO and Russia is one of ongoing tension and conflict. Differences in values and interests have led to clashes in Eastern Europe and the former Soviet Union, while NATO's expansion and Russia's military assertiveness have increased the risk of further conflict. While there have been some attempts at reconciliation, the future of the relationship is uncertain. It is clear that both sides will need to work towards greater cooperation if the relationship is to improve.